Hey, hi guys, welcome back to The Independence. I am streaming on X, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Today we're going to be talking about Fauci's hearing up at the Senate, the Rand Paul's hearing. Fauci took the fifth, and I think we should all follow his example. All right, I'm talking to the cameras here at the studio in the Manchester Public Television, and I will catch everyone on the flip side. Ooh, camera work. Hi, guys. That was a mistake. Oh, no, not again.
And now, here's your host, Carla, Gericke.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to The Independence. It is a rainy Wednesday here in Manchester, New Hampshire, in the great free state. And today we're going to be talking all things ouchie Fauci. So many of us were super excited that Rand Paul was bringing Fauci back for a Senate hearing. And wah, wah, spoiler alert, here's the news. Fauci pled the fifth on every single question, including, unbelievably, the following. Senator Fauci, can you tell us what day of the week it is? To which Fauci replied verbatim, on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. Now, if you're like me and you're kind of going, wait a second, how does someone get to, I don't know, make rules for millions and millions, and actually, I mean, if we're honest, billions of people who took the vaccine in the end? How does this dude get to have this public persona and do all these things in public, but then when the time comes when we should hold him to account, he's like, yo, man, I'm a private citizen and you can't ask me stuff because I might incriminate myself. You may also recall that under the Biden regime, Biden gave two very questionable pardons that were issued by AutoPen. One was for his own son, Hunter Biden. You may recall that Hunter Biden was involved in a laptop scandal of magnitudinal proportions, but we'll put a pin in that one for another day. But the other pardon was a very comprehensive pardon that was issued by the AutoPen at the White House, in which Fauci was pardoned for crimes going back 10 years. That in and of itself is kind of sus. And now, of course, now that the information is actually coming out, and we will talk about that a little bit as well, you may have heard about Fauci's diaries. Where did the diaries come from? Should the government be reading our diaries? Legit question. But now he's just like, nope, I'm taking the fifth. All right, let me break it down for you guys if you missed what happened this morning. So the hearing kicked off with a discussion by Rand Paul, who did a sort of introduction. I guess it was maybe like a 5-minute statement in which he sort of laid out the landscape of what we have learned in the interim, maybe since the last time they had a hearing. A lot of the revelations that have come out is because of this information that is coming out that is being called in the media Anthony Fauci diaries. But indeed, these are notes that Fauci took during his role as a government employee, the highest paid, by the way, federal employee in the history of America. So even that seems a little sus, right? This man who claimed, I am the science, right, is now like, nah, don't ask me what's going on. But you know what? We don't have to ask him because we can look at his own notes. So over 1,000 pages has been released by Rand Paul. It's called The Reading Room, and you can find it online and go read it for yourself. In this treasure trove of information, you can learn the sort of contrast between public statements that Fauci was making on TV, Mr. The Science in his white lab coat, so everyone must be scared and listen to Big Daddy Science. While in his own notes, he is saying often almost the opposite, or he is a lot less certain, or he is bragging like the megalomania, and I mean that term clinically, that he exudes in his own note-taking, all the awards, how special he feels. He actually brags about being maybe the most popular man in the world. I don't know if we're repeating the sort of programming from when the Beatles said they were more popular than God, but it kind of gave off a little bit of those vibes. So let's talk or stand still for a moment with the diaries, right? Anthony Fauci's diaries. Interesting, the sort of overlay with like Anne Frank's diaries. I'm just thinking out loud for a moment here. But were they truly his diaries? Because I gotta say, when I heard the word diaries, I was kind of like, whoa. I keep a very personal handwritten longhand journal. I believe everyone in the world should do that. It is a very good way to make sure that you have alignment between your thoughts, words, and deeds. It's a great way to kind of know what you think and to figure things out and to really just release things that might be bothering you. But I was like, oh no, is the government now got access to like, can a SWAT team show up at my house and kind of pack in all my handwritten diaries and cart them off? The good news is no, or at least not really, or at least they gonna have to have some really, really, really good arguments in a criminal case. Civil, little different, right? Because that's private citizen to private citizen, but you against the state, we still have constitutional protections. So I was kind of like, oh no, did they somehow FOIA a personal diary of Fauci? And look, everyone knows I am not a Fauci fan. I have called it from the start. I have called it accurately from the start, from February 2020, and I can prove it to the extent my content wasn't censored, but luckily I keep everything on my website, carlagericke.com. So what were these notes and how did they find them? So here's the backstory. It was not a FOIA request, so it wasn't a Freedom of Information request. What it was is Bobby Kennedy and the Maha crew going in to their department and spending 8 months searching over 11 servers to find these notes, and then compiling these notes in a collection of Fauci's record keeping and then releasing it to the public. Why am I so excited about that? Well, most of you know I do a lot of open government work. I do a lot of transparency work. Why do I do it? Because, of course, I believe you can't actually reform things or you can't fix a problem if you don't know what it is. And if we don't know what the government's up to, like we saw in COVID mania, then we can't actually have a functioning government. As one of the senators, it may have been Rand, said this morning, trust cannot be ordered, trust must be earned. And I will tell you, Anthony Fauci does not deserve your trust. He didn't have mine to start with, but he definitely doesn't deserve it now. So what did he say? What were his exact words at the start? So this was Fauci's verbatim opening statement where he pled the fifth. However, given Senator Paul's obvious obsession. Note these words, these sort of clinical terms, these sort of like weird indictments of the intentions of the senators who are trying to get to the bottom of COVID mania, where Anthony Fauci and the bad guys locked you down and mandated injections for you. And now they're just like turning it around on it. So, however, given Senator Paul's obvious obsession with calling for my prosecution, this is Fauci now, his repeated slanderous comments about me, and recently he's publicly releasing of my unredacted personal diary aimed at embarrassing and intimidating me, the man who said I am the science and locked you and your children down for more than a year, who closed schools, restaurants, gyms, who left your parents or my parents or other people's parents to die alone in hospital, is now intimidated by accountability, by his own words. He says further, the only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything that would vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, behind bars. Now, I can assure you, as someone who is a student of history and someone who is heavily censored over the past 6 years for uttering the words Nuremberg Code in the context of a legal system, behind bars might be charitable. All right, so let's look at some of the nonsense that is going around this whole thing. So a couple of just my impressions from watching what I could this morning. I will pull a quote here from Maggie Hassan. She had to weigh in, but I will say this, and I don't mean this partisanly, because, you know, the show's called The Independents. I think the left and the right are wings on the same bird, and it is a turkey of a bird. I think we could do a lot better with having the state be as small and as limited and as controlled and contained as possible, so that we do not end up with the scale of the misfeasance that has now occurred globally. So Maggie had to say the following. Let me see here. I don't know if I'm going to find her exact quote, but here we go. Maggie Hassan, who of course is our Democrat senator up there in the swamp, said today, Dr. Fauci, I want to start by thanking you for the 50 years of service to this country at the National Institute of Health. And it is unfortunate that you have to be put in this position that you are today. It is unfortunate that you, the mad scientist who destroyed the economy and destroyed people's lives and really just like, oh, it's a tragedy that you have to be put in the position to come actually justify your actions. She says, and it must be enormously frustrating to know that this hearing is designed to entrap you. Now let's stand still a little bit with that notion of entrapment, because I want to show you guys the magic trick that they do. And actually, while I think of it, because this is clearly I'm going to rant today, I want to talk a little bit about the fifth. But before I forget, I actually want this to be the call to action for today's show. From now, going forward, forever, you should pledge to yourself that every time a police officer speaks to you, a town official wants something, if a government agency person ever talks to you again, just repeat Fauci's words. So just say back to him, on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based on my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, right? Just be like, hey, no. Because I can tell you, if this man can do that, then every single American and every single person in this country should start doing it too. All right, so let's talk about this entrapment sort of narrative magic trick that they're pulling. So they're taking a man who for years occupied the most powerful public health platform in the country, issued guidance that reshaped our daily lives for hundreds of millions of people, claimed the mantle of science itself, and whose private diary now shows significant daylight between what he wrote for himself and what he told the public. And that is as polite as I can be on the air. And now they're reframing that demand that he answer questions under oath about those discrepancies between what he told us and what he really thought, i.e., unalignment, i.e., crazy, i.e., evil. So now they're saying, in order for us to try and get the answers as to why, Dr. Fauci, did you say this over here? Well, clearly you didn't believe it. Why were you saying it's not a lab leak when it was a lab leak, right? So now they're framing it as this entrapment, as this ambush against an innocent victim. Boo-hoo-hoo, poor little Fauci. Well, let me explain how this sleight of hand works. So one, they're inverting the power relationship. Two, they're pathologizing the questioner. So they're making the subject itself sacrilegious. They're converting accountability into persecution. They're preempting the evidence with moral framing, and they're linking it to a larger tribal threat. So now let me explain what I mean by that. So this magic trick, by the way, only works if you back home accept the premise that certain people, once they've talked about the science, somehow become, I don't know, above all of us to the extent that they can do what they want because they can evoke something because they wear a white lab coat. Side note, the white lab coat was literally introduced in order to get away from homeopathic and old body medicine back in the turn of the last century. Like the lab coat was a mental trick, a visual trick that they did so that when you see someone in a white lab coat, you actually denote authority to them in a way you probably shouldn't. It's the same reason, by the way, judges wear black robes, why the dudes in England have the weird wigs. It is a signaling that they are authoritative over you. And the question you have to ask yourself is, are they? Okay, so this entrapment and magic trick, when they do the inversion, it works like this. As I mentioned earlier, Fauci is not a private citizen. He was the face of a federal pandemic policy, claimed to embody the science, and he now has been caught out because we have the information from the note records that he himself kept. So they're saying it's all we're asking for is basic accountability for someone who had enormous power, right? So now for him to be like, no, I'm just Joe Schmo. What? That's literally what he's doing. Not legit. So the words that the Democrats have been using are things like obsession, unhinged. This is being designed to entrap. Of course, all of that makes Fauci suddenly sound like the victim, right? It's an attack on Rand Paul's motives so that the actual evidence, were you lying to all of us, doesn't have to be confronted. So once Rand Paul and all the other senators up there in Capitol get painted as crazy. We know this move, right? This is the you're a conspiracy theorist move. No. We're not conspiracy theorists. We are early reality adopters. People like me were right from the start on all of it, which means no one gets to claim, oh, we couldn't have known. At one stage, Fauci was like, we couldn't have known. Turns out from his own notes, he knew. He knew it was a cover story. Fauci funded, NIH funded the gain of function research that made a pathogen more virulent a engineered man-made pathogen that escaped a lab, and that is what happened to all of us for the past 6 years. And now he's taking the fifth to say, well, I don't want to go to jail. I don't really want to be accountable. I won't even tell you what day of the week it is. All right, sacrilege of the subject. So they're all using the thank you for your service. It's so unfortunate you're in this position. All of this converts a powerful official, Fauci, with these lab coats, I am the science dude, into a new victim martyr. Suddenly you're like, oh, poor Fauci. They're like, oh, by the way, his diaries revealed that he actually had a heart infraction of some sort after one of his injections. So, there isn't evidence that those two things are directly linked, but I do find it interesting that we are at the stage of statism where possibly they're actually hurting themselves. I will also say, just trust your own eyes. Go look at two things at that Senate hearing. One is look at how deathly unhealthy all the aides look behind the Democratic senators. Like, it is actually noticeable. So you don't have to take my word for it. YouTube it, go look at the hearing and be like, whoa, these people actually look ghoulish, unhealthy. Why would we be listening to these people? In fact, if I was writing a Black Mirror episode, I think metabolic health and actual cellular health should be a prerequisite of being in politics at all. We could get rid of all the snakes and all the snakes oilmen easily by being like, you have to have a basic benchmark of real health in order to tell other people how to live. All right, so criticism of his record is being reframed as an attack on science and on the public itself, right? Now they're saying that accountability is suddenly persecution. How dare we ask these questions? How can a demand for sworn answers after what we went through and after all the suffering that currently exists? Because there are millions of people who have been harmed by the choices of the public health officials of this country. And I don't think asking someone to provide answers should be deemed persecution. They are also introducing this sort of closed loop defense where they're saying any uncomfortable fact is dismissed in advance of this sort of idea of entrapment. No, we know the diaries say that, but they're just saying that because they want to catch him out. And that was the second thing I wanted to say. Go look at the video. There's a moment where one of the senators asks Fauci, was he lying in his diary? So there was something that he had said, maybe under oath, under the hearing. I'm not entirely sure of the actual original statement, but I guess there was a contradiction between something he had said in one place and something that he had written in his diary. And so the senator was like, Fauci, were you lying were you lying to your own diary? And he gets this. Go look for yourselves. I'll see if I can find the clip, right? He gets this incredibly sly, cunning look on his face. And it is such a obvious tell that he was like, and I noticed it and I was like, I'm a lawyer, right? So I was like, oh, I wonder what that's about. And I was like, oh, I bet you. His lawyers have told him, right, this fight is now in the court of public opinion. The goal with the hearing, of course, was to get him to perjure himself. We all know that. We all know that's why he took the fifth. And so I believe that this fight is now in the court of public opinion. We are here to persuade you of what happened to you now that the scales are off your eyes, so to speak. And his lawyers are going to start to say either that the diary entries were illegally gotten, or which they're not, by the way, because they were on government servers and it was under the auspices of the head of the HHS, of course, Bobby Kennedy. And so I think all of that will withstand and will be on the up and up. But I think they're going to start to say that either some of it's fake or how do we know, and sort of push the veracity of it. So basically what they're going to do, as they are wont to do, is to create more confusion in the court of public opinion, because that's really all the government and government officials and shady people have to do, is they have to kick the can far enough down the road from 2020 to 2026. That's move number one. Once we've kicked the can, now when we're demanding actual real accountability, they're like, you can't, please don't hold me accountable. How dare you? I'm just, oh, poor me, right? And so it is actually a farce and it's laughable. But because I'm me and I want to leave all of us with some hope today, I'm seeing a lot of cynicism out there, right? Especially from libertarians, especially from conservatives, especially from the people who were right. You know, it's really annoying when you're right all the time and no one will listen to you, or the government actively censors you, or you know, you're shadow banned, deboosted, all of that good stuff that I've talked about ad nauseum and that you can read about on my website, carlagericke.com, if you're so inclined. But we are in this situation because there isn't accountability. But we're also in this situation because people rarely seem to understand what is happening in the now. I mean, in the literal present, going back to that statement I made where I said, you know, the people claiming we couldn't have known, that is nonsense, because some people did know. Why? Because some of us are whole system analysts. Some of us look at the big picture and kind of go, hey, if I'm just a little more skeptical, a lot of this isn't adding up. You know, pangolins, wet market, saying it came from Wuhan, racist. I mean, just all of it was kind of ridiculous from the start. And I think there are a lot of people out there who should be deeply embarrassed. I'm sorry to say, maybe you feel a little shame that you got took. Maybe you do feel embarrassed that you let fear take over your mind. Maybe you're still in denial. Maybe you're getting closer to anger. You know, all of these things will put you on the path to acceptance. But here is the thing you have to accept. There is no such thing as public health, because health is the state of your own body, you as an individual. And if we learn something out of COVID mania, it is that if you cede that authority, that belief, that agency, that self-ownership to a bunch of bureaucrats, or worse yet, a bunch of bureaucrats in white lab coats, bad things follow. So here's the opportunity. The opportunity is that they have always had the upper hand on the narrative control, right? Perception over reality. But the reality is that they have hurt a lot of people. And I call on all of you, if you are angry, start doing the following things. Plead the fifth whenever you deal with the government. Start to talk about these issues. Don't be ashamed. Start to process it and work through it so that you can get to the point of acceptance where you understand it is your personal responsibility as a human on this earth to be healthy. Just go do that. Stop worrying about what everyone else is doing and figure that out. Because I can assure you, if you do that, your life will improve, because it's your life and your body, and no one else can tell you what's good or bad for it. All right, that's all the time I have for today. I didn't even get into the legalities of what the Fifth Amendment can and cannot cover. I believe they're going to hold Fauci in contempt. I love that Rand threw Fauci's lawyer out because the lawyer was like, I just want to say some things, i.e. testify in sort of on behalf of his client who was taking the Fifth. And Rand rightfully said, oh no. And when the guy wouldn't shut up, he was like, get him that out of there, which I think was great. All right, that's all the time I have for today. I wish everyone peace, love, and understanding. I wish you actual peace, love, and understanding on this issue. Work through things, but in the end, you have to accept it's up to you. All right. That is what I got today. Thank you for joining me. I will see everyone back here again next week. Bye, guys.